Hello everybody and welcome to another hobby cheating video, and today we're putting away the paintbrushes because we're going to paint with markers. Let's get into it.
The strict technomancer that is Vincey V.
Let us get to the technique and learn it Vincey V style.
Yes, today we're going to try something a little different. One of these showed up in a recent video, but these are the new AK real markers, paint markers. And they're very interesting. I use them on my Trench Crusade Warwolf, and I really liked the effect. And so I picked up the entire set courtesy of Michigan Toy Soldier. By the way, link in the description where you can get 5% off. They are an affiliate partner, and check them out. It's all the great hobby stuff you could want. At any rate, let's take a look at this set here. I want to put these through the paces today. I really haven't used them very much. Normally when I review things, it's after I've used them for a while. These are more interesting. I want this to be a little more experimental video as we look at all the colors, and let's just see what we can do. So without further ado, let's get over that desk and let's get painting. All right, we're going to start with something I think these should be quite well aligned to. And that is, we're going to start with this big endless spell. Now this is just a big magical foot. It's like the foot of Gork or whatever. This is from Games Workshop, from their the manifestations for the Auric War Clans. And this thing's been sitting around kind of zenithal primed for a while, and I just didn't know what to do with it. And then I looked over and I saw this and I was like, what a perfect test. Big, flat areas seems great for the markers. So I take this series of greens and yellows and such, and we're going to go to work. So the first thing you notice about the markers is that they, again, you just touch the marker to it and it is acrylic paint. Now, this is a standard water-based acrylic paint that comes out of this marker, same as anything else. The marker tip has a sort of solid felt-ish tip. I don't know what exactly it's made of, but effectively like a Sharpie or something is the closest thing I would analogize it to. And when you touch the paint on, it does stay there. The paint is light fast and water fast and all of that, so you don't have to worry about reactivating it later or anything of that nature. And so it's pretty easy to just like lay down the base coat of that color as I turn the whole foot green. I try a little shadow color here, but it's a little bit darker than I actually want, but we just kind of run that around the whole space at the bottom of the foot. Then I get out a slightly brighter yellow and yellow-green and do a little bit of highlights across the top of the foot, as well as like inside the little magical place and stuff like that. I'm also going to use sort of a dark brown here to paint the earth around it. This is like the chipping medium color. That's a very nice dark brown. I really love this. This is what I used in the Werewolf video that got me so excited originally. I used that same dark shadow color from earlier to then kind of hit all the rocks and stuff like that. I use a lighter brown, and we're going to go ahead and just kind of stipple dibby-dabby stuff like that to get the lighter colors on the earth. And then I take a lighter off-white gray color and do some edge highlights on the rocks and stuff like that. All in all, that's kind of the process I went through. This didn't take long. Like, other than I used a hairdryer to dry the initial green because I had put so much on there, but other than that, this was maybe like, I don't know, 10, 12, 13 minutes, something like that. Now, it looks rough. And so, you know, one of the things that occurs to me right away after this first test is that these things are really good for basically doing your base coating, right? So if you're just laying down some colors, this is actually a pretty quick, effective way to do it. The pen and holding it is quite natural, I think, for most people. And so if you're just trying to get base colors down, then this is a pretty effective way to get there, especially on these larger models like this. Like, this is a big, giant, endless spell. It's not really that important. I'm not trying to paint to a high quality. But of course, I want to push it a little farther. So let's try this on a more normal size 28mm model. Since we're on the Iron Jaws tip, let's go ahead and grab ourselves an old Ardboy. Now, this time I left it primed completely black, and there's a reason for that. I wanted to give it a try and see how these markers worked of various shades just over the pure black, okay? Like, is there a notable difference? Do I have to zenithal or slap chop or something like that first? So what I did here was go ahead, we're just going to grab this series of blues and we're going to try to do some blue armor on the Iron Jaws guy. So the initial blue itself went down pretty well. What I noticed with these is that when I ran them over, I experimented with a couple different colors beyond what's here, but when I ran them over a zenithal surface, I got a pretty solid coverage in just one pass, so they were very fast and effective. I noticed going forward, though, that when I was working, if I did work directly over black, it usually took like 2 applications for most of the colors, and some of them are just a little bit of a struggle, as we'll see later on. So the nature of this was then I got in that lighter blue, and I did some highlights. Here with this turquoise pen, you'll notice it's very, very stark. Don't worry, we'll address this later, but I just kind of pop in some of those blue highlights. This led me to my next realization with these. If you're into a sort of sketch style of painting, so knocking in through quite bold strikes of paint, your base tones and your highlights and stuff like that, these are actually a really efficient way to do it. The marker tip is pretty big, so there are just areas on this guy I can't get to. But for the most part, for the major surface areas, I actually found it to be pretty easy. You can like rotate the marker sideways and use the side of the thing. It has a rather long tip, which is nice. Much like a brush length, basically, is what the tips are like. And you can then like lay down all of that paint really fast. So doing the base coat like we saw before, but as well as sketching out your highlights and shadows becomes really a very quick, easy process. Now, later on, we're going to cover what do we do from there, right? You've put on these colors, now what? Okay, so that was the test with the orc. I also, with the orc, wanted to test some of the metals. So, because there are metallic pens in here, and I'm always interested in true metallic paints. So these have both like a steel and a silver. They got a couple actually beyond that. There's sort of a darker one as well that's a gunmetal. But at any rate, I got out sort of one of the dark ones. You can see here, I just cover the side of his blade and stuff. Then I'm going to take some of that dark gray to do the flat of the blade. I thought this actually came out really nice. So for doing like the flats of blades, this color was actually perfect. And I might legitimately just use this all the time whenever I'm doing the flat of blades like this. It was very easy. It stuck onto the metal paint with no problem. Went on super smooth. Looks great. You can actually kind of rotate a little bit, like how you apply pressure with it to get more or less coverage. So that's interesting and something I'm going to play with more. I then got out a little bit of the silver to just like put on a little highlight. And importantly, that led me to my next question, which is, can I do edge highlights with these? And the answer is, yeah, mostly. So here you see I did a little quick edge highlight on the sword, and it was fine. It worked okay. You do have to be very careful if you're trying to use the tip of the marker to draw a thin line, because the tip of it is pretty soft and will bend, and you'll get a much fatter line than you intend pretty fast. If you're using the side of the marker, again, brush pressure, or pen pressure, I suppose in this case, is really important. If you just lightly sort of graze the surface, you get a nice, really sharp, razor-thin edge highlight. If you apply any kind of pressure, the paint will flow out. That is something I really noticed. These things, you wouldn't think so, given the nature of the marker, but the paint really does flow here quite well. And just with even a very light amount of pressure, you get quite a lot of coverage flowing out of the tip of the pen. Useful, very useful when you're trying to do those base coats. Trickier when you're trying to very lightly graze for an edge highlight. So I give them like, I'd say maybe a B-, C+ on doing the edge highlights. I think I'd probably just use a brush in the end because I'm comfortable with that. But for actually laying down those tones, very effective. A there all the way. Okay. Well, it wasn't just these paint markers. So what we've been looking at so far is the AK Real Colors. But there's another set of markers, and that's these guys. This is the AK Play markers. So these actually have a brush tip as opposed to the standard like Sharpie tip. And I wanted to give those a shot as well. Are those maybe better, like, right? Because we come to a sharper brush tip, it has more give like a brush. How are these going to work? So I got out this little Stormcast, Ratcast fellow that I had, because I had way more converted than I ended up painting for my army. And I thought, let's try it with, there's sort of a gold and some silver and stuff like that, but let's just try to put that on. We'll try it with some gold and some red for our experiments here. With these paints, they're a little different. You kind of pop the top off, you pop the back off, you've got a clicky, 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 the back a few times to make some paint flow down into the brush tip, and then there you go. Then you just apply the paint. Now, as you can see here, the gold paint goes on pretty well. It had a pretty decent opacity. I don't like the color of it that's in this pen. It's quite an ugly color of gold. It's quite green gold. But as far as like efficacy of putting it on, yeah, it was pretty good. It's pretty shiny. Nothing too bad. I didn't see any sparklies. It's not a bad metallic or anything of that nature. It has to be pretty thin and ground because it's flowing through this kind of weird brush tip. In the end, and then I went ahead and tried it with the red, same thing. The problem I found with these is that, honestly, I don't think with these play markers that these really are doing what I want them to do. Because the tip of these is still very soft. It is a brush, but it's like a synthetic sort of, kind of polymer of some kind. And the issue is I have no control over how much paint is in the tip of that brush, is in the belly. It's just flowing. So I found that you often got a lot of paint flowing out of the thing, probably more than you want. With a normal brush, I can really control the consistency of the paint, and I can't do that here. Honestly, I just didn't really see the use for these, as they kind of had the traits, the sort of bad traits of both elements. So the play markers, sadly, probably going to be a pass for me. Now, let's get back to the real markers, the real color series. So I wanted to try to basically do a whole model with these things. So I've got out this little girl. This is a 3D print that I use for teaching classes. I love this. She's like a swordsman. It's a great model. We can try some of the reds here. Let's just start out real simple. Let's just go ahead and see how that looks. Let's lay down sort of this darker red and then a softer red on top. This I actually really liked how it came out. Here with these reds, them being very transparent, and with the model being zenithal, I had a really good result. I noticed that there is still certainly some translucency to this paint, as I would expect with all acrylic paints. So having something like the zenithal did impact the overall color. All right, but that's just her butt that we did there. Let's do the rest of the model. So I'm just gonna let this roll. Let's see the rest of that model get painted. Here we go. So, as you can see, pretty fast. Again, I didn't really, we've got more work to do on her, but for just, laying down all of these base coats, here this model's a little more open. She didn't have things that were, hidden where her arms are close to her body and stuff like that. So I was able to mostly get to every spot I wanted. Obviously, if you're dealing with models with very, recessed areas, the marker just can't get in there. I ran into that some, for sure, with the little Iron Jaws Art Boy. But these came out, she came out pretty well, pretty fast. I didn't hate it at all. It was a very fun, fast, pleasurable experience to put on the base coats. Normally the worst thing, you're getting out the paints, you're getting them, you're mixing them. Here I just pop the top off a marker, put the color on, close the marker. Done. It was fast, and I was just flying through the different colors. And you know, what we're going to look at is how can we then go beyond that. All right, last test. This one's just kind of simple. I wanted to test some of the lighter, more like skin colors, yellow colors, the yellowish tones, over straight black. This is always a really hard test. Yellow never goes over straight black, so I thought let's give it a shot, right? I'm going to put this through the worst possible conditions as just a judge of like, well, what does the opacity look like? So I got out this little Space Marine Terminator, and, you know, in the end, what happened was exactly what you'd expect. So I tried two different things. I laid down this fleshy type yellow color over half of him, and then I wanted to try the yellow over that and the yellow over the black. Kind of give you a little basis of comparison there. What I'll say is the sort of fleshy tone there, the yellowy fleshy tone, the first color you saw me put down, that went over the black pretty well. I was actually quite impressed with the opacity. As sort of this mid-tone color, it went on pretty clean, and I really didn't have to do much. It was took maybe like, I put it on and then I just cleaned it up a little. So let's call it 2 passes over straight black, but not bad. Then I took the yellow and I ran it over the whole model, including the side I had sort of prepped with the undershade, as well as the just straight black. And here I got more or less what I expected. Over the sort of fleshy yellow tone underneath, it came out really nice. I got a bright, clean, good-looking yellow. Over the black side, it was pretty splotchy, and a lot of the black showed through. Again, I don't count that as a negative. That's what I would expect to happen. They're not magic, basically, is what this told me. This final test was really all about, can I work over, any kind of surface? Should I zenithal prime them? What kind of undershading do you need to do, etc.? And so my final sort of thought there is these markers definitely work best with the zenithal. After all my testing through these models, what I found is that a quick zenithal prime, either through an airbrush or a dry brush, will really help you, and these markers will lay down a nice, good-looking base coat. You can knock in those highlights and get all that done in a few minutes, and then get on to the other work. Let's talk about that other work, because the reasonable question you might ask is, where do we go from here? I said I really like these if you're working in like a sketch style where you're knocking in the highlights and midtones and shadows, just kind of quickly blocking everything in. But then your model still shows very clear layer lines, and we've got to bring those together. How do we do that? Well, the first option is we just get out some washes. So let's go back to that girl I painted earlier. I got out 3 washes and just did a nice quick wash over the whole, the different areas of the model. So some Nuln Oil on the black, some Reikland Flesh Shade on her face, some Seraphim Sepia, some Agrax on her hair, that kind of stuff. And I found it worked pretty well. One, the wash tends to collect in the recesses, and so that's usually where you have the most trouble getting the little marker into, so it kind of covered that weakness. And 2, it did what washes always do. If I were looking to speed paint a whole army, legitimately this might be a good strategy. I'm going to try it in the future with like an oil wash as well, so I can wipe it clean, because I think that might actually be a really interesting way to go, but that's for future testing. So that's pretty simple. Just the washes go over the top, nothing reactivated. That's what you want to see. Added the nice depth as we would expect it to. Worked well, created the deeper shadows where I want them, and turned my like base coats of just the markers into something more visually compelling. But let's go back to the foot, because that one I wanted to work a little differently. And so there we had some very stark sketchiness. So what I do is I take this green and yellow from Army Painter, and this is the first thing. I realized they don't have to be the exact same colors, because I think that's what everybody gets hooked up on. Everybody's going to get concerned, yeah, but I don't have that exact color. I don't have the same color in a bottle that I have in the marker. Who cares? You just need something relatively close, and you can just mix it if you wanted to. It just has to be in the general area. And so I thin it down, and I just go ahead and glaze over the transition line between those 2 paints. And what I found was, pretty quickly, I was able to knock those 2 colors together without really any kind of issue. It worked really well. Like, one you know, 2 quick glazes over the surface, and I had something that was certainly playable and disguised those layer lines. Now, obviously, if I was trying to get it to be a completely smooth blend, that would be a lot more time. But I mean, this is just a stupid endless spell that gets summoned. It's not like an actual model. Who cares, right? So I wanted to try the same thing with the orc because he was really stark. So I just grabbed some royal blue. And with the royal blue, I go ahead and blend between the turquoise and that darker sort of ultramarine blue that I originally started with. Yet again, I found this worked pretty well. I was working, you know, super fast here, so I'm a little messy. But whether you're glazing over the whole surface or just fuzzing the line between the 2 layers, I found that, again, I was able to do that without too much trouble. The fact that that blue is a nice mid-space between those 2, and that's really the key. When you're doing this, you don't need to find the original base tone of the marker or anything like that. Just find something that's roughly in the middle of your 2 colors, and you'll end up in a good place. And what I found overall was that I was able to get there. Now, you know, I still have to clean him up. Obviously, these are all super rough tests. I took, you know, less than 10 minutes on any one of these things. So it wasn't like this was me trying to paint a model to display quality or anything. But I found that it could be a very useful part of the thing. Okay, so where did I land overall? I'm going to tell you where I land, while I show you how all these came out. Here's just a little review of, you know, 4 of the key models that we painted. So here's how they look. Where I landed overall is that I think these markers are actually really cool. The acrylic paint they put out is smooth, it's quite matte, it has a decent opacity, it goes on really easy. Those are all strengths. The weaknesses are obvious. There's no way to blend. You cannot like wet blend with them because you'll get the other marker's color into that marker, and you don't want that. So you don't want them polluting each other. So you're going to end up with stark layer lines. If you're working in like a sketch style, or that's how you want you want to set your colors first, it can be an excellent way to do so. If you wanted to do some freehand, you could even do that, just like laying down some base stuff. So you saw on the little Skaven guy, I did some freehand. Here's a very quick process of what I did with that, right? I just kind of walked through, laid down a brown, knocked in a skull shape, put on some lighter browns than a white, good to go, right? So very quick process. All right, back to the models as a whole now that you can see them again. The reality is that all of this is going to require cleanup by brush still. I want to be clear. You're not going to paint the whole model in probably 95% of the models you touch with the markers alone. It's just not going to happen. But as a way to do quick base coats, as a way to do quick sketch style, and as a way to just work fast in general, I think they're really nice. So I was pretty impressed. Larger flats are often a challenging thing with our brush to get a nice even application of the paint. With the marker, I had no issues at all. So for things that, if you are challenged by things like big cloaks and stuff like that to make the paint appear smooth, honestly, I found it to be completely easy, no drama llama on that stuff. So overall, I really liked the real markers. I thought they were cool. I was excited to get this set. I'm excited to put them through more work. Like I said, if you're interested in checking them out yourself, they have smaller things than this whole big set. By the way, they do have individual packs as well you can pick up. But all of that is available through Michigan Toy Soldier. There's a discount if you use the affiliate link below. I really appreciate it, and it does help support the channel. But hey, if you like this, give it a like. Subscribe. We've got new hobby cheating here every Saturday. If you've got some questions about these markers I didn't answer, as I'm sure you may, drop those down in the comments below. One other quick thing here. I realized at the end that these markers might also have another hidden strength, and that is comic book style or comic art style painting. So comment down below if you want to see me tackle that comic book style in future. That's something I've never touched on the channel, and these markers give me a real idea to do it. I think these would be the perfect tool for that comic art style. So if you want to see that, give me that comment down below. So, give me a let's see that comic book style, or let's see that comic art, something like that. Okay, but at any rate, thank you so much. If you want to support the channel, check out the link I mentioned in Michigan Toy Soldier or any of our other affiliate links to pick up your hobby supplies. It doesn't cost you anything extra and really supports the channel. You can also check out the games that Uncle Adam and I make. Our newest game, Rain and Iron, is down there and available now, along with all of our other games. You can check out my other podcasts. I've got a game design podcast called Snarlcast with Adam, as well as a role-playing game podcast called Fireball the Gazebo with Ninjon. Both of those are linked down below. Finally, of course, there's our Patreon focused on review and feedback and taking your next step on your hobby journey. As always, though, I thank you so much for watching this one, and we'll see you next time.